The title of this message is Famine of the Truth. Famine of the Truth. Before we do that, pray for Rebecca. She's suffering with shingles, which can be very painful. Also, pray for me. I'm having a glaucoma operation in St. Louis on March 17th. And it can go bad or could go good. You know, those things aren't absolute. But we've entered a new age where the truth is being suppressed. And I've often wondered about how the great falling away would happen. At least I think another piece in the puzzle has fallen into place, how the great falling away. The great falling away is not just going to, because actually religion and politics go together, because Christ talked to the political leaders of his day and criticized them. Subjects like abortion are both a spiritual issue and a legal issue, and the same with how they manage marriage, a whole bunch of things, or both. So they go together in many ways that you might not think about. So the falling away is probably both in science knowledge, political darkness, as well as mostly spiritual darkness, and end up worshiping a man. Well, one of the tactics we now see being used in the suppression of truth is big tech. Big tech can block a story. They can, like, you might remember when the laptop from hell came out, it proved that the Biden family, both the brother and the son and the dad, were all involved in selling political privilege to other countries for money. It was a devastating story. It wasn't just one bad rogue son, like they said. And would you believe big tech blocked that story, as well as the networks. And anybody who tried to retweet it or anything, their account was immediately erased and blocked. And they did a good job. And so most people didn't know about it until after the election, when it came out. Oh, the FBI is investigating this, and it is not a false story. That came out a month after the election when it didn't matter. But they blocked the story. Anyone who spoke the truth, they canceled your account on Twitter, Facebook, and all the others that are major outlets. And of course, the networks did the same. They didn't do it. One thing that we've noticed, it used to be the networks have always been biased. Maybe their bias got worse after Vietnam, but they've always been biased. But they would cover any newsworthy story just with a bias. Now they've discovered something new. We don't have to cover a story. If a story embarrasses our side, we just block the story. We won't talk about it, and we'll try to intimidate any reporter who would dare even bring it up. So nobody even knows about it. You totally block that out completely. And both Ken and Tom mentioned that their accounts have been blocked. I think Ken is on some Twitter jail, whatever they call it. And he's not going to try to answer their charges and get out of it. He's just leaving Twitter altogether. And we're going to move some of our stuff to Rumble. It's a more independent website. Ken's actually got his own server for the day when we might need it. But I told both men, this would be to your credit. We actually tried to boost a couple of the shows on the pod, and we were told by, I guess it's Google. If I get some of the technical things wrong, I won't be the principal, that they didn't like our topic and wouldn't allow us to boost the show. They didn't really give a lot of explanation. But if it's anything that somehow makes the left's case look bad, they think, and we're small fry. We're little potatoes. You know, we're not. You can imagine any big guy with a lot of info they don't want, they block it. So that I call them spike stories, are never heard. A lot of truth about global warming, about the pandemic. For instance, this was an interesting story about the pandemic. Do you know that America's death rate is about the same as it was the previous 2 or 3 years? If we're getting 300,000 people killed by COVID, then there should be a big bulge, but there isn't. That means they're lying on comorbidity. There was a bunch of doctors who came out with that study, and they tried to put it on big tech. They blocked that story. Anybody passed it on, they chopped off their account. They cut that story out. It was on the internet for maybe half an hour, and it was taken down. They got a bunch of young, I call them young long-haired radical hippie types are out there looking for anything that they don't like out there. And they have churches involved in it. There are left-wing churches challenging what's on there, saying, well, you shouldn't put this on. A lot of churches, they don't actually say they're for abortion, but they sort of say, you know, you conservative churches shouldn't criticize people who like abortion. Churches shouldn't talk about it. That's their way of saying it's okay. Does that make sense? And there's a lot of that. Dan Celia's ministry last week, and I enjoy him. He said a lot of stuff he says is very factual. His ministry was kicked off Facebook. That's one of his biggest distribution points. Now, he still is on AFR radio and a very small internet that I guess he runs himself called FISM, which I've watched once or twice. But you realize his media footprint or his reach to the public has now been limited, because there are a lot of places you can't get AFR radio. Like we were in Springfield or Kansas City, you can't get it. I know that because I've searched around when I was there recently. So, and various other ministries that are preaching too much truth, the way the left-wing people on the media think, are worried, when are they going to cut off our account? We're worried about that too. When are they going to come for us? Now, that is a tactic that is being used to squelch both religious and political truth. I believe at least big tech and mainstream media tactic will be used by the great dictator we call the beast in the future for the great falling away of truth. They're seeing how effective it is, and they may get better at it. They may get better at it. Here's a story you might find interesting. Australia has a bill in front of its parliament in Canberra about getting more competition on the internet. Google has told Australia a threat. If this bill passes your parliament and becomes law, we will cut off all Google servers in Australia. And a lot of small businesses in Australia use Google to find customers to connect to them. It'll be a disaster. Google is threatening Australia, and they're also pouring money to the political opposition. In other words, Google is acting like they've got their own foreign ministry. They're also threatening an African country, Uganda. I don't really understand all the details of that battle, but the big tech companies, and of course, the Democrats are not going to do anything about it, who are in charge of America, because it's to their advantage. You all understand that, don't you? I have to explain it's to their advantage. So it's like a combination between the left government and big tech. They can squelch stories. They can cut off access to the public. Ken said he had a Twitter following of about 8,000. If I get the numbers wrong, you get the idea. They found excuses to keep cutting people off his account. Same with Huckleberry, the former Arkansas governor. Huckabee. They messed with his account. He's by the way, an elder in his church, so it's both his case political and biblical. They've cut him off too. That happened about a year or so ago. And I'm thinking, wow, if they get away with intimidating Australia, then they'll be able to pretty soon dictate to Australia, these churches are saying stuff we don't like, cut them off. You see that, don't you? These politicians are saying things that we don't like, cut them off. You see now how well the tactic works. China has something called the Great Wall of China. It is an internet wall which doesn't allow anything to go into China that the communist government doesn't approve of. Like anything that's about free speech, democracy, and almost all religious stuff is blocked. And actually the underground Chinese church is big, has gone back underground because they do have churches open. They've even done things to the Catholic Church over there which shocked me. And I have read the details but don't remember them now. But the Communist Party has to appoint all the top people in these churches. And they have people in the churches who assure that they don't say anything they don't like. And they're kind of pushing people toward worshiping the the chairman, Xi, of China. That sounds a little bit like the beast. In other words, we're now seeing trends of tactics of troubling times. Now, I'm going to admit something. Generally, things go in an undulating fashion, up and down, up and down. So right now, we're going to be moving down as far as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. But we may have a bubble up now and then where we get a little victory here or there. And we haven't gotten the beast yet, obviously, in the false prophet. But you see the trend, don't you? And once they learn that something works, I guarantee you they will do it. The Chinese actually got help from Google, an American company, on how to suppress the Chinese people. They give them these scores. They got cameras all over. You say the wrong thing that they don't like, or you go to a church on the wrong day, or whatever or a church that they don't approve of, a lot of underground, your score drops, and you get on their bad list. And there they got re-education camps. They want to bring that to America. That ought to scare every American spitless. If you read the history of what the communist world has done, and I could give you gruesome details, you get the idea. That's happening in China to this day. And what bothers me, there are athletes who are supposedly all upset over slavery, yet they're supporting the communist government, which is doing horrible things like that right this moment. Not 160, 70, 80 years ago, right this moment. Anyway, I can get off the subject. Anything that's unpopular with the secular left is threatened to be cut off the airways as much as they can. Now I'm going to read Amos 8:10-14. This is about the famine of truth. And obviously I'm speculating. No one can be sure of everything, but we at least want to think about it. Amos 8:10-14. It's like the morning for an only son, and the end of it like a bitter day. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord God, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. They shall wander from sea to sea, from north to east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, but they shall not find it. As God lives, O Dan, and the ways of Beersheba. These were the northern 10 put up their golden calves, etc. They shall fall and never rise again. In other words, Amos is saying the northern 10 are going to fall into captivity, and they did, 722 BC. So I want to look at this whole question of the famine of the word. We're going to try to at least discuss the question of how, why, and when the famine of the word. The first point I want to make is we believe this. There were some prophets like Elijah who didn't put anything in writing. And we believe God had prophecies put in writing, so they apply to us. Actually, Paul says that too. He says the words of the prophets are for those of us in this, we might call it the New Testament Christian age. So if this is written, it's not just historically for what happened to the northern 10 and maybe later to Judah. It's for us. And the way it's written, I don't know if it ever was completely fulfilled in the days of Amos and Jeremiah. I was just trying to look at the record. I don't know if it ever was totally fulfilled. So I think the full fulfillment of this prophecy is an end-time fulfillment. You can debate that, but I think it is. Now you're going to say, why did it happen to Israel? Here's what the experts on the subject say. They say the people in the northern 10 and later Judah had no appetite for truth. They hated what prophets like Amos and Jeremiah had to say, especially the leadership, the elite. Anyway, we could talk about attacks on Jeremiah and others, but you know most of the story. They didn't like it. And the people had no appetite for truth. We don't want to hear it. We want to know about it. Doesn't that sound similar to the left in this country? They don't want to debate the truth on issues because they probably will lose the debate on issues like border security and jobs. By the way, do you know one of the bad things about abortion that you may even haven't thought of? One of the problems for Social Security and Medicare There are not enough younger, middle-aged workers pouring into it. There's a bulge in the population. You've heard about the baby boom, of people all coming into Social Security all at once, but you have a lack of younger, middle-aged workers pouring into the system. You know why that is? 62 million babies have been aborted. And by the way, it's not just 62 million. Some of those people would have had babies themselves. You just think about it. It could be 80 million workers and children are missing. They would help the economy. A lot of these stores and schools could use the business. Like Toys R Us are out of business. They support abortion, by the way. They killed off their own market. There aren't enough children. And I know you're going to say, yeah, but really, especially middle class, working class people, we miss those kids. So you think that a lot of these issues are just religious. No, it affects everybody. But I guarantee you that truth will never get put on the internet and be left on there. The Google people will get it off. They pretty much wounded Parler, so they're almost dead in the water. But they may come back at the end of the month. We shall see. But it says the people of Israel love sinning. They love paganism, especially the elite leaders. And they didn't mind taking advantage of the regular people, the little people. And the way the elites in Washington look at us, we're the little people. You may not think of it that way, but we are the little people. The elites are more concerned with bringing in people that will blindly vote for them, even though it will be harder on the little people, especially people on the bottom, getting jobs and having good salaries. You pour in millions of workers pouring across the border. Anyway, I'm saying these issues interrelate. But that's what they were doing. They were taking advantage of the little people. So they were apathetic toward hearing the truth. So God said, okay, if that's the case, I'm going to remove the truth from you altogether. None of the prophets will be available. Now, maybe that only partially happened when Jeremiah was locked up. But so we don't know about the past. But here's what I think may happen to the future. If the world, at least much of it, is hostile to the truth, God is going to say, okay, I'm going to take the true message away. And then trouble comes, crisis comes, and people start wondering, why is this happening? What's going on? Then they look for voices that they used to hear explain some of the reasons why things are wrong. By the way, do you know there are powerful forces trying to get Tucker Carlson off television? Ask yourself why. Because he speaks truth to power. I'm not saying he's right about everything. Nobody's right about everything. But you can tell he speaks truth to power, and he's not afraid. He says things that others are probably afraid to say. They'll come and get me. And they're trying hard to get him off the air. They're trying to end the guy who runs MyPillow because he's a very outspoken Christian. And a bunch of stores are dropping his product. Some of the big corporations, they're part of the power elite as well. Now, I don't know, but the day they take him off television, I'll kind of swallow hard, realize it's starting to work. You think, oh, they'll never take him off. I've seen Fox News, which was much more conservative, start getting more and more liberal. You see that and the pressure they're starting to put on. The truth, and AFR Radio actually said this the other week. Now, they might have been kidding, but there's a group called the Southern Poverty Law Center. I hope I get that right. They're very radical, very radical. They have listed AFR Radio as a hate group, and they're now a top advisor in the new administration. They say they're going to try to get us off radio, get our radio license away. Now you're going to say, oh, they won't be able to do that. I don't guarantee it. I would not guarantee it. And I'm not saying it's going to happen right away, but they're going to be working at it. They're going to be working at it. And someday it could happen. People be going bad and they'll say, wait a minute. There used to be voices that explained the Bible and talked about what's wrong and what's going on, and I can't find them anywhere on the internet anymore. I can't find them on my TV dial, my radio dial. The truth is gone. And they're going to, and that prophecy will be fulfilled. Why? And how does this apply to us? Well, too many people do not care about the truth of the Bible. They look for truth in Eastern mysticism and other things. So God said, God will make if you don't appreciate it, God says, I'll just take it away. Just like water in a drought. There's some water in a drought, but you got to hunt for it. It's hard to find. Maybe there's an obscure website here, there, little truth there. Actually, our website, the EA, has been taken down several times recently by attacks. Now, they survived and they pay anti-hackers. They explained it, I don't understand it, but somebody sends you so much message requesting your stuff, they call it overloading the site, and it takes it down for maybe a couple days. Well, isn't that a strike against the truth? And they probably take it down not because they want to debate us on Bible issues. I think it's hatred and pettiness, and that's my opinion. Hatred and pettiness. They can disagree with us and, get their own website and say what they say. So just like in a drought, water is harder and harder to find. In the drought or famine of the Word of God, truth will be harder and harder to find. It'll drive people to frustration and fear. And here's what could happen. Now, this is pure speculation. I have no idea how this will be fulfilled. But as events get critical, and God knows that the tribulation is about to come, God will take his church or churches, various groups, into places of safety. So we'll be sequestered, which means we probably won't be on the internet, won't be on radio, won't be on TV. The church will kind of go quiet. And those politicians who stand for the truth, they'll be silenced, bribed, coerced, whatever. They'll go quiet. And then all of a sudden, here comes the tribulation, and there's no truth. There's no truth. Now, at some point, the two witnesses will come, and they'll be the only truth out there. Maybe. I'm speculating here. They'll be the only truth out there. And of course, they'll try to shut them down. They won't be able to, and they'll try to say bad things about them, but it'll be the only truth out there. Now, all this is very possible. This famine of clear prophetic understanding may be coming, and how many years it is in the future, I have no idea. And anytime you say something like that, you get in trouble. But I would say the way things have gone in recent times, the end is closer than it was a year ago. Would you agree? I mean, obviously that's true, but I mean, the speed of events, truth being shut down like this, is more than it was a year or two ago. We're closer to the end. And obviously the two witnesses and the tribulation haven't gotten here. Let's look at the when. We can't really know the when, how many years it is, but I feel getting rid of a very patriotic president, and maybe the same in Israel, because Netanyahu's the fourth time they're trying to remove him. He's up for a tough re-election. Will put the world in a position where the chaos will bring about great political changes, because politics and nature abhor a vacuum. If America and Israel decline, somebody else is going to come up to fill that vacuum. And we already know who it is, but only we'll see the timing. And one of the things that they've done on social media, they ask people to rat each other out. Like, I think it was the governor of Oregon. Now, this had to do with Thanksgiving and Christmas, but it's kind of funny. She said, look in your neighbor's window. If you see more than, 6 or 4 people celebrating, you call the police. We'll give them a big fine. Rat out your neighbors. The mayor of New York said the same thing. I forgot all the reasons why he said it. Rat out your neighbors. By the way, do you know that's what totalitarian governments do? Stalin, Mao, and Hitler. Actually, Mao did something terrible, the Red Guard. They had all the young people in school spying on their parents. Oh, they did terrible things. One of my former students, she tells a great story of how they escaped from Vietnam after the communists took over, the terrible things the communists did to the country and her father. But the part of the story I want to mention now is, because he had been a pilot and flown for the previous Allied government, they had a family move in next to them. just by accident. And they were so friendly. And they befriended them, and it was just for many, many months. Until one day that family discovered that the husband was unrepentant. He still didn't believe in the wonders of communism. And off he went to a re-education prison camp. And they know, in retrospect, that family was moved in just to spy on them. And they got some reward for ratting out their neighbors. If Stalin and Mao and Hitler did that kind of thing, you know that's coming. Can't you see it? They're already encouraging it now. Rat people out. So they're afraid to express their true opinions on the job. That's actually happening now in a lot of workplaces. I believe this, and that. But boy, if I let any of my fellow coworkers know what, and I'm not making this up, I've heard people say that. College campuses are getting, just as I left SEMO, I noticed a certain angry attitude toward me from certain people. I won't go into details. It hadn't really been that strong before. It's like academia has gotten to that way. We're going to call out everybody that doesn't see things from the far left, secular, anti-God perspective. And maybe give them low social scores, cut off their credit card, maybe even confiscate certain bank things. I don't want to scare you too much, but what we do know is a vast evil dictatorship, the Holy Roman Empire centered in Europe, is coming. And I think we have taken a step closer to the end of the age. What about believers? What we should do is get closer to God. If you think the end is getting closer, get closer to God, and we should try to be as unified as we can, because we're going to need each other. Be as unified as we can. And don't get discouraged. Remember we talked in Philippians 4:10 last week, how Paul said, I've learned to be content. Good times, bad times, prosperity, poverty. We should learn to be content. Don't get discouraged. Actually, I think the left wants all the Christians, conservatives in America, to get discouraged. Don't bother to vote. Stop going to church. Be discouraged because we're in charge now. And I understand being discouraged. I've kind of mourning for the American people because obviously things have gone badly for us. But I believe the second coming of Jesus Christ is closer than it was a little while ago. And we should rejoice at the fact that Christ is coming closer. 1 Thessalonians 2:8. 1 Thessalonians 2:8. And then the lawless one will be revealed. The coming of the lawless one by the activity of Satan will be with all power and pretended signs and wonders, verse 10, with all wicked deception for those who perish because they refuse to love the truth. Doesn't that sound so much like Amos and the famine of the word? The reason that the beast will be and the false prophet will deceive these people for the great falling away is because they do not love the truth. You know, it's a hard thing to think of people worshiping Stalin, Mussolini, and Heil Hitler was Hail Caesar. It was a way of worshiping Hitler. Those guys did not look like anybody worth worshiping. But it happened. And something bigger is going to happen one more time. This guy's going to sit in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, and the world, for the most part, is going to worship a man. Now you're thinking, all these Christians in the world know better than that. They do now, but maybe a few years from now, they won't know any better. They love lies, and they're going to get a lot more of it. Here's an interesting lie. When we drink, we get drunk. When we get drunk, we fall asleep. When we fall asleep, we commit no sin. When we commit no sin, we go to heaven. So let's all drink. Well, you know, that's a lie. Drunkenness is not good for it. But he made it sound good, didn't he? As we see untruth get magnified, know that we're closer to the end. But what we should do is be positive, get closer to God. Satan wants us discouraged. I'm going to just paraphrase it. I have it written down, but in 1 Kings 22, 21 to 23, God wants to lead Ahab into destruction, and he said, people argue the details, that he's going to allow the spirit world to put lying spirits in the mouth of all his prophets. So there probably were 400 prophets. They were the opinion leader of his day. And they all said, oh, you're going to win. Go up there and do it. The gods are with you, or God is with you, however they looked at it. When you look at the media and leaders in America and people in New York, Hollywood, Washington, don't you sense a lying spirit? The spirit world has gotten them saying and doing things that really are bad for the country, spiritually bad, and undermining churches. That we have been caught in evil influences. Now, the argument is why God doesn't stop it. Maybe because we're getting the government we deserve, or maybe God is bringing the end sooner than we thought. Sooner than we thought, maybe not than God thought. Isaiah 52:20. Isaiah 52:20. Woe to those who call evil good, good evil, who put darkness for light, light for darkness, bitter for sweet, sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes. They think their stuff is working, but it really isn't. We need to rejoice. I'm mourning for the American people, but remember, Christ is coming back sooner, probably. We should be positive. God is coming. Jesus will save this nation and the world. And what we should do is do our little part to help preach the truth. And that means you've got to stay unified, stay together, as long as God allows us to do it. And by the way, Psalms 37 and a bunch of others say that evil will lose, and in the end, God will win. We should look at the period of history as a story. And in a story, in the middle of the story, the villain seems to win, in most stories, like the middle of the story. But as you get toward the end, the villains crash and burn, and the hero, which is Jesus Christ, comes out. So right now, we're in the middle of the story. The villains are winning. And they may win for several more years. Don't get discouraged. Know that in the end, we win, because we're with God. Stay strong. Don't get discouraged. Satan's team will lose. We're in a spiritual warfare, Ephesians 6, in high places, and you see an evil influence in high places. You're going to ask me, why so much pushback against Trump from medicine, sciences, Hollywood, just all the commanding heights, as one senator put it. I'm not saying Trump is a perfect man. I'm sure he made a lot of mistakes, and maybe he's arrogant and all that. I'll buy all that. But here's the thought. Why the pushback against Trump was so great that you don't normally see in politics? Because many of his policies countered what the devil wanted. Natalie said something profound once. She said, you know, Trump made one big mistake when he moved our embassy to Jerusalem. He made a powerful spiritual enemy. But also, peace in the Middle East. That's not what Satan wants, especially peace where Israel is secure, that Abrahamic agreement that they made, what Kushner made, Trump's son-in-law. The devil doesn't want that. And I think many of his other policies, he's the most anti-abortion president in history of America. You know, he actually worked it out where Planned Parenthood couldn't even take some of the money Congress gave him because he put rules on them. He was serious about it, unlike other Republican presidents. He said, you got to separate the buildings. This is not women's health. You got to separate the accounting. They said, we can't do all that because that's really not what they're into, women's health. They're into abortion. No other politician, at least in my lifetime, has done that. And he's trying to help the little guy, you know, keep jobs for the little guy. And, I could think of all kinds of things that they're going to mess with the energy sector. So we will no longer be energy independent. That is bad for jobs. Well, you'll see in a few years, in case you doubt it. What he did was counter to what the devil wanted. You could sense a spiritual tidal wave trying to take him out. Isaiah 59, my last scripture. Justice is turned back, Isaiah 59:14. Righteousness stands afar off. For truth has fallen in the public square, and uprightness cannot enter. Truth is lacking, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. The Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no justice. And think about it. Truth has fallen in the streets. That's where we now stand. No justice. Our courts are doing stupid stuff. I can say a whole lot about our bad courts, but most of you know it already. Don't get discouraged. It is a discouraging time, but don't get discouraged. We're not likely to be deceived and fall away, but many of our relatives will, and they'll put pressure on us. In spite of that, stay close to God, stay positive, stay strong. Okay, if you all rise, I'll say a blessing on the